Hello, welcome. This is Chris Jansen. You're watching the True Media Roundtable. This is the 9th episode of the True Media Roundtable, which is made up of individuals who are studying, learning, and teaching concepts related to natural law, truth, freedom, and true care. Today, I got with me three gentlemen, and we've all gone through some similar experiences in life. We're just realizing as we were chatting. So I'll let each of these guys introduce themselves when we get started. And today, the subject we're going to talk about is the subject of narcissism and selfishness. And we'll see where the conversation goes from there. So, if you want to start us off, Dom, and maybe we can
Sure,
start off by just talking about what narcissism is and why that subject is important to discuss. And then we'll go to Brander next.
sure thing. Dominique Tremblay, véritéauxconséquences.com, my website. I produce content both in French and English. Really enjoy talking to you guys. I'm, um, I've lived I had two relationships with borderline personality disorder women who had the mental illness, and it's really related to narcissistic personality disorder. So, and I went through hell and I went through a lot of pain and suffering, but now I'm alive and well. So I really want to testify that you can get out of these relationships, and how you can survive to it, and take trick take some tricks and tips, just to live through it. So I'm glad that we're gonna have this conversation, guys.
Trips and ticks. That's a tricky one. Tricks and tips.
Yeah,
Tips and
Mhm.
tricks. There we go. All right, Brander. And I should say before we get going on, thanks for coming up with this idea and contacting me. I was kind of not sure what we were going to talk about this week, and I got a message from Brander, and he had this idea of a good subject. So I want you to go ahead and give us your point of view.
Yeah, this is something I'm currently living with, this narcissism personality disorder. And I kind of reached out to you because I have the One Great Work Network playing all the time, and I see your guys' True Media Roundtable. So I figured I'm in the network with you guys. I might as well reach out at this point. And here's the topic that I'm dealing with. And it needs great care, this topic as well, because a lot of people don't really necessarily understand their own symptoms of it. And um, personally, I look back on my life, and I can now see the narcissistic tendencies that I had, thinking about myself and putting myself in manipulating situations. And I never got too far with it. Like I never went full blown. But I look back and I was like, man, like I'm glad I could give my head a shake now more than ever. And living with it right now, this is affecting my our children. I haven't even seen them in 85 days at this point, and things are moving forward. So this is a very important topic, and it's also links into parental alienation, because a lot of alienators are narcissists, and there's a lot of lies in there. There's a lot of manipulation, and I figured I would reach out to everybody here to bring this, to give it some light, to whatever extent we can. So
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for doing that.
no problem.
Will, what do you got to say about narcissism?
Oh yeah, my name's Will Keller. My website's naturalfreedomleague.com, and the mental disease of narcissism, it's rampant, and it actually ties in with a couple other um, mental diseases that we see that we talk about, which is Satanism and solipsism as well. So we can dive deeper into each of those because they all tie in together. And I think the majority of people have narcissistic tendencies, but like Brander was saying, when you act on them and they become the dominant role in your psyche, which dictates your behavior, that's when it's going to be a problem. Um, So looking forward to this conversation. Very important.
I looked up before we got in narcissism. It's a word I haven't used often in my life, but it relates to mythology. Um, Greek Narcissus, the name of a beautiful youth in mythology, which is Ovid, Metamorphosis, who fell in love with his own reflection in a spring and was turned into the flower Narcissus. So it's self-love to the extreme. Narcissism. To me, it makes me think of that Smurf who used to carry around the little mirror, always be looking at himself.
Yeah.
Or looking in the mirror. Yeah. It's like, it's one thing to have some self-pride and to build your own confidence. Those are things I usually work on, because if anything, I'm coming from the other side of things. But what's hard for me to recognize, there's a lot of people out there that are coming from this total other side of things, where they're number one, to the extent where they don't even probably sense or recognize other people's feelings and emotions around them, because everything's overshadowed by their own big giant ego shadow that's covering up everything. Like the whole world revolves around just that person. And it's good that Will brought up solipsism, because that's like the thing we think about when we're a little kid, when we're 6 or 7 years old, and we just think to ourselves, like, maybe I'm the only one that really exists and everything else is just a play going along for my benefit. The thought crosses your mind when you're young, when you're a child, but then you grow up and you recognize that things you do have consequences, and things other people do have consequences. And it's hard to recognize that there are people out there that are somehow ignoring that fact, that that what they do affects other people, and they're so caught up in their own actions. So I guess the easiest way from my point of view is for us to start, like Brander was saying, with ourselves, and look at our own tendencies, and then look at how to start changing those. So what would you say, Dom? Is that an issue, narcissism, something you've ever battled with, or is that just foreign to you?
Well, as Render said, there's two kinds. There's when it becomes a permanent, you know, trait in your personality, or for long term. Some people they can heal from this mental illness with years and years and years of therapy. Uh, but some don't, of course. So it becomes a really permanent trick. Uh, but most of us at some point can display these traits on a temporary basis, and it's totally a different story. Because of course the self has some kind of importance. You want to have self-preservation. You want to have self-love. To survive, to preserve that gift, and all comes down to self-defense and all these principles, of natural law. But and yes, of course, at some point you can cross the line where you go too far into being too conscious, or too or having displaying too much importance of yourself, and then not feeling empathy for others. Because one of the most important thing about this personality disorder, whether temporary or not, is the lack of feeling, of ability of feeling empathy for other people. um, but it's really tricky. I've been, as I said, 4 years in relationships, and it's very hard to distinguish, because these people also have a very good a gift to feel the emotion, or to really go deep into your soul, or the soul I don't want to say victim because
I
I
call it the
hate that word.
supply.
Yeah, exactly. Unlimited. They are really sucking the energy, sucking the good out of their uh, energy supplies. But yeah, and it's hard. It's really hard for someone who doesn't really know or is not really aware of these traits and how they work. So when I was into that first relationship, I began to look, deep into what is it exactly, the borderline personality disorder, narcissist personality disorder, and really found out a lot, and then I went. I broke up with that girl, survived, and then I immediately after went into another relationship with another borderline personality disorder. So then I found out it was me. I was going for these kind of girl, trying to be the savior of these girls. And that's one of the trait also of the people who are usually in a relationship with these people, is that they are trying to be a savior.
Mm.
So I have a lot. There's a lot to say on this, but on a personal level, I would say that yes, we sometimes cross the line and you know bring too much importance on the self, but I guess it doesn't. It's not really damageable or doesn't cause much damage as long as it's really on a temporary basis and it doesn't become a permanent trait. So that's pretty much what I'm gonna say for the opening.
Right on. Thanks, John. What are your thoughts, Brander?
Well, I can relate to what Dom was saying because I feel that I've survived a decade of narcissism, two relationships, three kids, and what I've noticed and throughout my research about this, and I've been more heavily into it more so in the last say 2 years than before. And what I've come to see is there's two types of narcissists. There's the covert narcissist and there's the grandiose narcissist. And the covert narcissist, which is I'm talking XX, and I'm not trying to demonize any female right now or anything like that. I'm just this is my observation and what I've come to witness. And the first relationship I was in, it's very calculated. They don't say a lot. It's very quiet, and there'll be these outbursts of things. And I left because I started to see these trends that I just didn't really like. There was no reasoning. There was just it was all me, my way, this, that, and amongst other things that happened. Where I was even to the point where I'm the one getting assaulted, right? And I never did anything wrong up to that point. It was just more bickerbacker, and I didn't deserve it. So as that kind of unfolded, what I began to see is, when there's a child involved, and see, narcissists, they target which you care most about. That's what another tendency that I'm finding. And the covert narcissist, like that ended up in family court, right? Where now I haven't even seen that my daughter in 2 years. And she used family court to um, basically just to gain any edge. And it was, and to the point where I couldn't communicate to her. There was no reasoning with her. She used a lawyer who herself was a moral relativist, and I would even put another narcissist. So they're working together. That's very dangerous, where it is about me, and they would snarl at you. They would want it. It was like purposely done to make you angry and for you to react. And that's another tendency, is they want you to react so then they can blame you for your actions. And which most of those actions, like we get into righteous anger, there is righteous anger. I do have a valid reason to be angry at that. And moving forward, and that, like, I love what you said there, where you feel like you're a savior. And I met another woman shortly after that relationship, and she was going through a divorce and a lot of things. There was the whole love bomb, and then I knew this right off the hop of this narcissistic tendency, but I felt like, yeah, well, I wasn't thinking narcissism when we first met. I knew there was some tendencies like that in there, but you kind of, you're under the spell, if you will, right? Like you're kind of riding a high on emotion where things are going really well, and you're kind of ignoring these red flags. Like, after a month, I think it was about a month or two into the relationship with the Grandois, is telling me that she loved me right away and expecting me to tell her back right away. And I was hesitant at that time, but then I lowered my guard and I said, yeah, I love you too. It's okay. Like, let's, and lo and behold, a couple of years later, right? A couple of kids, and then it just, there's another part to it too, like alcohol. And when you get into the drugs, like I noticed that also, not drugs, but alcohol in particular. I noticed that that's like, it really kicks a narcissist into high gear. It's there's something to do with that. I haven't looked into that whole dynamic of alcohol and narcissism. That's on my to-do list, but I noticed that alcohol it'll kick you right into this manipulative lying. Doesn't matter who it is, it's lie, 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 and they'll lie so much just to um, distort the truth. It's so much. Now, how do you unravel all these lies? Like, okay, there's this lie, there's this lie, there's this lie, and now I'm sitting here trying to, like I said, the last 8 months I've been documenting this, and now it's like, man, like, how do I even layer this out? It's just pages long of all these different lies, and it's not that I'm using that against her in court, but it's like you got to document it to kind of know where this symptom is. Like, there's just so much now, right? And so the Grandois is very much me. It's very more in the open. And one of the uh, sayings that I had to hear for quite a while was "happy wife, happy life." And there was, um, yeah, I guess that's the point I wanted to make, was there's the two different distinctions, the Grandois and the covert narcissist, because they can come at you at different angles, you know, and that's a important thing to recognize, especially if you're moving into relationships with somebody. You want to take a look, you want to get to know them. You don't necessarily want to just be loving somebody right off the hop. It's got to grow. You got to get to know somebody. How do you unravel? I'm 38. How do you unravel 38 years onto somebody now, and all the things that have happened? It's serious business getting into relationships like that. And it opened my eyes. It made me fully aware. So,
Yeah,
it
especially when kids get involved. I mean, that
yes, it's
amplifies
very
the
hard.
situation, right? That
Hmm.
that definitely adds another layer of complexity, and like you said, something that can be used, which, kids should never be used as leverage, but that happens so often. We hear so many stories about that. So
Yep. That's
it's
that's the
tricky.
worst case scenario, is having children and them being used as a weapon. And I mean, it's not even, let's maybe take off, not even focus on the kids. You could look at even work. Narcissists will target your work. My work was targeted. The one great work, when I was working and doing that stuff, I was teaching a class that got targeted. You know, um, Me doing my online work and building websites, that got targeted, where I couldn't even do it for 2 months until I had to rebuild myself. It's very. I'm not going to say I live in fear, but it's very unnerving. Like, it's scary to just have that all kind of go to the side when you've been working on something for so long. And that's what they do. They kind of target the things that you're thriving off of, because they want to steal that energy from you. And it's very hard to navigate. It really is. I mean, you can go out there and call somebody a narcissist all you want, but I mean, okay, how do you back that up? Well, you better have some notes of what's going on. Is my 2 cents on, if anybody else is in a relationship like that, because you will get the red flags. And my suggestion is start taking little notes. You know, because if push comes to shove, at least you have something to back up on. And especially children, or if you lose a job, or you know sentimental things, if you have property together, like, lots can be targeted, and that's just fair warning to everybody.
Yeah.
What would you say, Will?
Yeah, those are all great points by both you guys. I think ultimately the reason why, people are hearing about narcissism so often, it's kind of mainstream. That's because a lot of people are in a traumatic mindset, and it's ego dominant mindset, meaning me, dog eat dog type of world, and it's an inflated self-importance. And I think ultimately it's not knowing the self, and they have internal confusion, and there's trauma there. They haven't healed. They haven't got to know themselves on a very personal, deep level, and done that subconscious psychological work. And there's confusion there. So whenever there's internal confusion, you seek external control, and this can manifest in all different types of behavior, and narcissism is one of them. When I think of a narcissist, I think about the demon, the succubus, right? The succubus in folklore is it's usually portrayed as like this beautiful maiden, even though it can be male or female, and it woos the other person, and that person, it latches onto that person, and then it sucks their life force energy. This is what a narcissist will do, right? It starts out great, but then you realize that you're quickly being played, and it can be mentally, physically, and emotionally draining to get out of. And that's what it is. It's like a leech. That's what they do. They want control, and ultimately, they want to control the person. Um, and going back to your question, Chris, about personal narcissistic traits, yeah, I've seen both sides. My early career in the hip hop industry was, extremely successful. So I had narcissistic tendencies, but I didn't act on them, and they weren't dominant, meaning I still had insight on other people's feelings and emotions. I think with narcissists, there's no introspecting, there's no empathy. They don't care. They'll twist anything, and they'll lie about anything to make themselves feel better, but they're never taking the other person into consideration. Um, but when I was doing music and stuff, I had the whole rap life, the girls and some good money and all that shit. So there was the ego was definitely, bold and strong, and but it never was a part of me. And so quickly, just through growth and introspecting and learning more about myself on a deeper level, I quickly left that life, and evolved into different realms of growth. And and like what Dom was saying about the ego, self-inflated ego, or dominant ego is not good. That's where you get into the narcissism. But then you don't want to go on the opposite spectrum or the opposite polarity and kill your ego, right? You need the ego. It's all about harnessing it and keeping it in control. It's all about balance. And I think that's really really important. We're seeing narcissism rampant today. It's just simply because people don't know themselves, and there's a lot of trauma and a lot of bullshit people are going through, and it starts in the family dynamic when they were kids, and they've never healed that. They never even thought about healing it. They're just going with the flow, and this is the norm in society nowadays. And this is why it's all about get yours. You only live your life once, YOLO, that type of shit. This is all everything. This is what it all portrays. It's just about you, and ultimately, that is solipsism. That one's own mind is the only thing that exists. So it's all about getting yours. And I think the extreme of that is narcissistic tendencies and behavior.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going to go with it, is pointing out how our society, maybe even our world, the way humankind is existing right now is in that state. And that's why it's a little bit hard, a lot, I shouldn't say a little bit, it's very difficult to recognize this tendency because it's so overwhelmingly all around us. If and I think this is why, really. I think it really comes down to having a life purpose. If you've really thought deeply about why you're here on this planet, eventually you come to the realization that you have some sort of purpose, and you look at anybody who inspires us. You see someone who does a lot of selfless things. They give away free information. They push themselves hard to help other people. What gives these people this inspiration to, make sacrifices even to help other people and to help the world or help their community? It's a totally different mindset that's rare in today's world. And that's because people have gone astray, that moral relativism is the religion, you know, which we could also call Satanism. That's another way to look at it. It's seeing that yourself as a god, and becoming, thinking that you're becoming the god. And so,
Service to others versus service to self, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, that's why it's hard to recognize, because it's so prevalent, And so, hey, what's up, Ronnie? Welcome.
Yes, thanks for having me. I didn't think I was gonna make it, but luckily I made it. So cool.
We're talking about narcissism today. And so we were just going around discussing, those tendencies, kind of how we see them in ourselves, how we see them in other people. And from where I was going to go from there next was to ask, like, what causes this type of behavior? And one other idea I had is, because I've been thinking a lot about psychopath in the world, like that's another way of looking at this problem, is there's this psychopathic tendency in humankind. And that's like the ultimate extreme, maybe even worse than just narcissism, when you have no feeling, no empathy. At least the narcissist has some feelings about their self and what they want, and empathy for themselves. And then, maybe the next step of extremity is none at all, just don't even care. And so I guess my question is, if we look at this a little deeper, what causes it? What's the root causal reason why we're seeing so much of this, and why it's so much around us, and why it's destroying our relationships?
Can I chime in on that one?
Sure, go ahead.
I believe we talked about this last night a little bit, and it does relate to. I was explaining in a podcast I was doing, or a show, that what they were seeing in the show today was me interviewing two gentlemen who, the effects. These are all effects. Where I was looking at getting down to causal factors, and the show was particularly about parental alienation. Well, now let's just kind of keep stepping back from there, is what I was doing. Well, parental alienation, how do you get that? Well, it comes from, say, moral relativism and narcissism. There's other things in there, but let's just stick to those two for now. And I kind of say, well, how do you get narcissism? Well, that comes from a poison worldview, Satanism ideology, and how do you become that? Like, what's underneath that even, and it really boils down to willful ignorance of, objective morality, truth, human rights, and then we look at the tree of evil from there, and willful ignorance. You got your lack of self-respect, then you got your self-hatred underneath that, which would be the trunk of the tree of evil. And then really, I think we all know this here, is it comes from parental abandonment issues. And it's that is the causal factors, that parents are not teaching their kids properly in today's world. That's my take on it. How do you guys feel?
Well, from my experience too, of course, there was some kind of childhood trauma that really triggered that traits. One of the girl, or one of the women had been sexually abused, and alcoholic dad and all that shit, and the other one has been given to adoption, and she never really bonded with her adoptive parents. So there is definitely a parenting issue underneath that causes this kind of personality disorder, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Is it abandonment? Is it being beaten, being left alone, being not taught the right things? All these will lead, or can lead to these personality disorder. And I've from experience, from first, eyewitness, not of their childhood, but of the effects these causes had on their on their lives. So yeah, definitely traumas that unhealed, and then what it creates, I think it's sort of a bottomless pit of emotion inside themselves, where they need to suck these, from yeah,
It's kind of
as
like
Brander
I
said,
never had that, so I want that, and they want to
exactly,
bring that
but it's
into their own
never
soul.
enough. It's
Hmm.
never enough. It's really a bottomless pit where they can have, they'll go with one relationship to the other, and it will never be enough. It will never fulfill them that kind of void that they have inside. So they will always look for another person instead of, as Will said, work on themselves, trying to look, they don't have that kind of, it's really hard. It, and there's alcoholism, as you said, because most of these people also develop excessive traits like alcoholism, drug, shopping, sex, whatsoever, to fulfill that void. And since it's never fulfilled, then they will be from one person to the other. So yes,
And I
definitely
would like to
childhood
say, yeah, that's exactly right.
traumas.
That's exactly right. Because my ex, I'm testifying from what I witnessed, is that she had abuse happen in her childhood. Okay, she's admitted that to me, and then now after our breakup, she's already with somebody else, and I haven't even got to see our children in 85 days, and she's already seeing somebody else, and he's over there with the kids, and I'm getting word of this. And there's community people that are actually reaching out to me. I'm not even seeking it, and people are reaching out to me. And the last match, she just got this message, I think it was either this morning or yesterday. She's partying and drinking heavily, you know. So I'm just, it blows my mind. It's hard. I talked to a few people, and even my good friend Dean Gunnarsson, he says don't let it get to you. It just flow through it. Like it does. It's very upsetting because I was the stay home dad. Now figure that one out. For 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that was 9 months long for her last season. Then when they were born, she worked on a farm and business, and I was at home, and she would drive home twice a day to breastfeed the children, and then I had them for the rest of the day, or other than when I needed to be at the farm. And throughout that time, I remember her always saying, she said to me, Brander, I'm like, beg me, almost like to the point of begging, don't ever let me drink again. Don't ever let me drink again. I said, I can't do that for you. I can help you and aid you and not, like keep it going. But it was like, because well, the philosophy was off, but she would say stuff like, it's genetic to our family, or she had some weird,
It's the unquenchable thirst of the narcissist,
yeah.
like
And so,
Dom was describing.
exactly.
But let's go to Ron. I want to kind of hear what Ronnie's got to say about the subject of narcissism.
Oh man. Well, number one, what you guys said was great. I mean, the whole idea of childhood trauma, I mean, and causing all sorts of different behaviors. I really got exposed to that through Gabor Mate, discovering him in documentaries, and then finding his book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, where he did that 22, 23-year study with drug addicts in Canada. And what did they all have in common? They had all been abused as children. Either something happened that shouldn't have happened, or the parents just weren't there in their life, which is another form of abuse. But when it comes to narcissism, man, that's probably something I'm still struggling with this to this day. And where does it stem from? At least for me, it's the need to be loved. I need to be loved. I want, like, my whole life, especially from 16, 17, 18, when shit was really getting heavy with my mom, it's like, go to the party, it's like, yeah, man, I got weed, I got cocaine, I got acid, I got mushrooms. I'm like, I want to be that guy. I'm the fucking cool guy. Everyone loves me. I got the drugs, I got the alcohol, I got music, I got stereo systems, I got it all, man. You know, I'm that guy. And where does it all stem from? It's that need to be loved. Because in my situation, I had a mom who was never physically abusive, but the mental abuse was just unfucking believable sometimes, you know? And it throughout my life, you know, my parents divorced and all the shit going back and forth for the most part on my mom, a little bit my dad, but not really. He was pretty good, to be honest. I didn't see my dad for a long time, but why didn't I see him for a long time? It was because my mom wouldn't let him be in my life because he left her. And you know, I guess she just always, you know, it's just always a fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, basically, and used me every chance she got to fuck him over. So all of the abuse and telling me, like, you know, I remember being on the phone 8 years old. I'm on the phone with my dad and I'm like trying to talk to my dad, and my mom's over there, tell him you hate him, tell him you hate him. And I'm like, oh, I hate you, dad. You know, just like shit like that. And it, you know, the shit, like another great example, something that just sticks out to me is my mom. I remember getting in a fight about you know, not wanting to wear certain clothes to church or something, or not wanting to wear certain clothes like to go on an outing, just wanting to wear like what I want to wear because I want to express myself. And my mom being like, I bought you those clothes, they're mine, you don't own them, I do. And then just like take all the cool clothes, the Jim Morrison, the Jimi Hendrix shirts, just like take them on, hide them in her room or whatever, just disappears because they're not mine. I mean, she can't fit into them because I'm like a kid, obviously, but they're hers. I mean, just like psychotic thought. But shit like that, abuse like that, made me really feel unloved throughout my childhood. I mean, granted, I always had a roof over my head. I always had a meal. My mom never starved me. She never beat me. There was none of that. But that verbal shit, it's just, you know, some days you're just like, I've done everything right. And I'm still getting screamed at. Like, I can't win for little. Like, what the fuck? You know? My mom would be like, clean the house. I'm like, oh fuck, this is bad. Like, I'm fucking dusting fucking everything. I shit you not. My mom would come home, put a white glove on, come up to a surface. What's this? What's this? And I'm just like, oh, she's like, give me your fucking skateboard. I told you to clean this goddamn house. You know, just insanity. And I love my mom to death, and she's come a long way. She's not the same person she used to be. But what did that create in me? And all that shit with my, I mean, I'm still struggle with alcohol to this day. Why did I start smoking crack? Why did I use cocaine? Why did I use heroin? I mean, did any of that play a factor? Well, of course it did. And what did it turn me into? Somewhat, slightly, a narcissist, for sure. Like, for sure, especially when I found the hippie community. I thought that was the biggest liberation. And then come to find out it's all fucking bullshit. And all it's about is me, 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 me. All the fucking hippies steal from you, lie to you. They're not men of their words. I mean, all the people in my wedding photo is just like, ha, fuck those people, you know, like and then I'm discovering Mark and trying to wake these people up. And it's, oh man, 2020 has been a hell of a year.
Yeah, I hear you there.
The narcissist thing, I mean, sorry to go on a rant there, but yeah, first of all, I'm just really thankful to be here because you guys are awesome. You guys make incredible content, and I've been watching, and it's fucking awesome. So just to be in a chat with you guys, I'm like honored. So thanks for letting me say that. And
Yeah, man.
I think it's great too. You're bringing it back to some of the root causes, which is exactly what I was asking about, trying to get at. And here you're giving us a real personal, you know, explanation of how things happen in your life, and that's what we're trying to figure out. What do you got to say on that, Will? The progression? How does this narcissist thing emerge?
Yeah, I think Ron said something extremely crucial, and you guys all touched on similar basis, but the need to be loved. And this is where I mean, the family dynamic, especially in the formative years, 0 through 7, 8, even up to 10, and after that too, right? You can experience trauma all through your life and then not heal from it, meaning not thinking about it deeply and coming to terms with it inside yourself. But the majority of issues stem from childhood trauma. Like Ron was saying, it doesn't have to be physical, it can be verbal and emotional. And, I think emotional and verbal and psychological trauma is more prevalent than physical, and that can still do the same amount of damage, absolutely. But the need to be loved, and ultimately this is what a narcissist is. They have no self-worth, and probably that was instilled into them by their parents. Their parents didn't give them that love or made them feel worthy. And this creates a schism in the brain, and it's like any kind of subconscious work that you need to do. One piece of trauma goes in your subconscious, and it's like a skeleton in the closet. And if you don't deal with that, it grows and it gets bigger and it gets bigger and it overshadows you, and it will come out in your behavior. That's why drugs, alcohol, any type of escapism is prevalent for narcissists and anybody that has trauma, because the voice is getting too loud in the back of your head, right? So you got to escape it. You got to escape the responsibility. And that's what responsibility is. The ability to respond. Well, to what? This could be to morality, to trauma that you need to deal with. And that's what people understand. You need to understand that the trauma that we've experienced in our childhood is not our fault, but the responsibility to heal later on in life is our responsibility. That's on us. We need to do that work. And yeah, it's a really good topic for sure. So
Very well said.
ultimately, the root cause, it's trauma.
Trauma. And what you guys are getting me to thinking about is a little bit more about parenting. I remember noticing this dynamic when I was a kid. And here's the one picture that really sticks out in my head. We were at this arcade video game pizza place called Chuck E. Cheese. And my mom was the type that was always doing some kind of childcare thing. So we had some large group of kids there, and there's a mother with a kid. And this kid, the whole time we're there, is screaming at his mom and telling her what he wants. I want soda. I want pizza. I want money. I want this. And the mom never shuts him down. She never explains to him why what he's doing is rude. And at one point, this kid is punching his mom, you know, really punching his mom in the leg and in the body. And I'm looking at my mom like, what is going on here? This is wild. I couldn't imagine talking to my parent like that or hitting him. Respect obviously was not instilled in this child. And I've noticed it as I've grown up everywhere I go. There's a lot of lazy parenting going on out there where people are not dealing with their children's problems. And really love a lot of times is more than just hugs and kisses and being nice. It's it's helping someone understand what's right and wrong. It's helping them understand what's dangerous. It's helping them understand when they're doing something wrong and putting them in check. And that's part of being a parent. It takes a lot of time, and energy, and obviously you can go to the other extreme, like Ron was describing with the white glove, where someone's too heavy-handed. But that's also kind of a lack of responsibility, because it takes time to explain to a child, this is the right way to do things. Here's why it's important. But rather than going through all that creative thought of how to get this message to a child, a lazy parent will just make a heavy-handed decision and hit the child or take something away, or you know ignore the situation, like I was describing with the kid who's just straight up punching his mom. And you get these people growing up that haven't ever been introduced to boundaries. They haven't been put in check when they should have been. They haven't been explained. No one's explained to them what bad or good behavior is, and they think they're like a Disney princess or a Disney prince, and they're the hero of the story, and they can just do whatever they want. And they have never had the correct consequences being done to them, so they just go on living in this sort of fake world where they think, nothing matters. And so, that's kind of been something I've recognized through my life. So I think there's a important thing of learning self-discipline, and that happens through teaching our children, discipline, and that also instills value. You need to protect something that's valuable. You don't leave something that's really expensive and fancy right at the edge of the desk where it's going to get knocked over. You put it somewhere safe. And that's the same thing of terms of treating children and raising our children. And that's, to me, a big part of the problem is how children are being um, led astray. And there's a lot of other factors too, but um,
Sport teams, I find, is I was a very athletic child, and I noticed that there's a lot of narcissism that comes in with sport teams. Like, you got all the parents and all these kids, and I was actually, I don't want to make it too harsh on all the sports and all that, but like the activity is good. But people, like, when you're in a hockey dressing room, if you will, the things you see in there and the things you hear is very it adds into that whole narcissistic tendency, because it's all about us, and the parents are rivaling the other team, and it's all about us, me, like, even within that team. And it's almost like you, me in my situation, a lot of the time in the hockey particular, is like you're thrown into this dressing room, and you don't know any better as a child. You go in there, you play the game, you play hard, they try and teach you how to play the hockey, but there's so many other dynamics that are going on within there. They're talking about influence, and I just had a talk with some of the other content creators on another network. And I said, like, you have to take great care of what you're doing, even if it's a sport or whether you're on a network, because you're dealing with the influence of other people's minds. And when you're, if you're in a dressing room, a hockey dressing room, and 90% or more are all narcissists, well, what do you think that energy is going to be on if you're already in there? It's almost like a trap, and
I
this
hear
is
you,
in
man, because
society.
that's what killed team sports for me at school.
Hmm.
It wasn't about the game, it was about winning the game.
Hmm.
And that, to me, just took away the fun. It's, don't get me wrong, I like to win. It's fun to win. But when you recognize that that's the underlying current, that's the reason, even from the coaches,
Hmm.
you know, then you, it just, it killed it for me. But what I was going to ask as the last question to go around here is, what do we do about this? Okay, we've described the problem really well, and I think we're all feeling it. We're all seeing it, we're all feeling it. It's hurting all of us. So going forward, what's the takeaway for listeners? What's the takeaway for ourselves? What do we do about this problem? How do we deal with it? And I
Well,
know that's tricky right now. You're going through it right now, Brander, but
yeah,
um,
yeah. Will
head on.
said it. Will said it actually. It's a cycle. Parenting, your parenting skill is a cycle. You inherit some part of it from your childhood. You have childhood traumas, but again, it's your responsibility to really break that cycle and really not perpetuate all these bad parenting that you receive. And most of the time we say bad parenting, but it's not necessarily intentional. You know, like the mother, of the little boy who let uh, her, him beat her or punch her. She's not really doing that intentionally, but even intentions doesn't matter, because whether it's intentional or not, it's still going to create you know a bad behavior or a bad trait in that personality. And when that person's going to grow up, is just going to do the same thing that he learned from his raising. So the goal is to really break that cycle, be a responsible parent, be a responsible human and help other, to raise awareness about their own flaws, their own traumas, and help them to heal them, or to just, do that shadow work of going inside and trying to heal your traumas one by one. No, you cannot, and it's not done overnight, but it can be done. It can be done. It's hard. Some people, they start from really far. If you've been beaten, you've been, sexually abused in your childhood, of course, it's gonna be way harder to find the tools. But there's help. The information is there. The information is available. The help is available. So really, it's about breaking the cycle and be a conscious parent and raise a conscious child, so that in the future, that cycle will be broken, and we'll have a better world with, child that grows into being responsible, and not display these selfish behaviors.
Break the cycle. Thanks, Dom. That's a good message. I think people could grab onto that. How about you, Ronnie? You got anything idea? Positive solutions?
Yeah, well, one, being a father, it gives me great joy to know that I am breaking that cycle. I'm sure that there will be some things that are unavoidable, that, there's just some things you don't see, and when someone starts to point out something maybe negative, let's say, about you, then the more they point it out, eventually you'll catch yourself in the middle of a sentence, or in the middle of like kid spilt water or something, or milk on the table. It's like, like how my mom was all the time. There might be some things that are unavoidable, but when, if your partner is aware of them, if you let your partner know that these are the things that you're struggling with, they can obviously point it out to you, which my wife does all the time. And my mom's name is Teresa, and I've told my wife since we started dating about my mom. And every girl I've ever dated, they never see it in the beginning. I'm like, give it time, you'll see it. Sure enough, my wife sees it now and has seen it for a long time. And I just tell her, hey, if you notice me being like my mom, just say, hey, oh, I'm sorry, Teresa. Just call me by my mom's name, and I'll be like, oh my God, no, I got to stop that. So, advice would be, if you're going to have children, break the cycle. And also another thing is, I understand that it fucking hurts what your parents have done to you. I understand, like, it fucking hurts. And yeah, my mom doesn't deserve my love, in my personal opinion. But at the end of the day, man, she's still my mom. She still carried me. I'm here partly because of her. And we have a relationship because I choose to. Right now, my dad just wasn't there really at all in my sister's relation. My sister and I have the same father, and right now, for whatever reason, for the last like year or two, she don't have anything to do with my dad. Doesn't want to speak to him, and I'm just like, Amanda, you got to get over this. Like, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he's still your dad, and guess what? One day he's going to be gone. You're going to be hurting, and you're going to want to call him, and he's not going to be there, and you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. Like, so to help in breaking that cycle and mending those wounds, confront your parents, tell them how you feel, and start to rebuild that relationship in the best way possible. And that's what I've done. And we have a great relationship. My mom sees her granddaughter, and, life is great, family wise, at least for us. So,
You know what really strikes me about what you're saying, Ron, is that when you do that, it's not just about you. Like you're saying, you could easily hold a grudge and say, because my mom treated me this way, I'm going to act this way. And that would be the selfish decision. But you're thinking about everybody involved, the whole family. And what's best for all is if you find a way to rise above that stuff and still relate to these people, even though you kind of probably don't want to in some ways. And when you do that, that's more like selfless decision. That's more like generous. That's more like thinking about everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
And when
that
I
breaks the cycle, right?
well, yeah,
Thinking
when I
about
was
the bigger picture
when I
and
was
not
eight,
just ourselves. So
right,
that's great. Good point,
exactly,
man.
exactly. And I was gonna say, I've been there in the angry mindset, and you want to have nothing to do with this person. I told my mom before she left for Iraq in 2008, I hope you come back in a body bag. Like that, that's the last thing I said to her, and then she was gone for a year, you know. And when she came back, my stepdad was like, "Hey, do you want to see your mom? She's gonna come back on that day." And I told him, I don't like, I got to think about it, to be perfectly honest, because I was still so angry about
Mhm.
everything that had happened. And I just, it just, once the anger subsides and you can think rationally again, I'm just like, nah, at the end of the day, man, she's still my mom. Like, I can't just abandon her. Like, it's like, she always gave me food. She always gave me a roof. She always tried her hardest to be the best mom she could be. She just, she was raised by, two Polish parents, and her mom could barely speak English. I mean, her parents, her mom was Nazi Germany, had her whole family killed in front of her. I mean, was probably raped by the soldiers that took her. And I mean, it's like, it's that World War II trauma just passed down, to my
The
mom. And
cycle, right?
exactly.
Trauma
And
cycle.
Let's
yeah,
go to Brander next. What's your ideas for breaking the cycle, for changing things, for
Well,
dealing with this problem?
I think what I'm about to say is a little bit more. It depends on everybody's situation. Every situation's different. Um, but what I know is, like, if you're with somebody and you're just, say, breaking up because you're with a narcissist, I mean, it's best to go no contact. Just no contact, cut out, done, you're out, move on, do your thing. Um, a little bit more of a hardcore stance, and this is in a couple. I've been researching some other people who've been speaking out about narcissism and solutions and what to do and how to handle them. And this is more of uh, a very direct, is to expose them for what they are. And I don't mean like malignantly. I'm saying, like, you could go very little contact and still expose them. You have to talk to people. And, like, look at my situation. I have children, right? Now, what am I going to do? I'm got to deal with this woman for the rest of my life, or she's there. That's the mother of my children. So this behavioral, and she'll never admit, a narcissist will never admit they're a narcissist. So now it's up to me, and it's not like I'm going to go tell my children this. That's another thing. Like, I'm not going to go alienate my parent or alienate my children and say, like, oh, mom is this. No, 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 no. This is between her and I, right? And it's exposing it. And I mean, it's really hard in my situation to deal with, because a lot of her friends are alcoholics. They're partiers. They even thieved stuff from me. So, but it's exposure. It's exposing the disorder, and you got to. It's very hard to navigate, to do it the most moral way possible, because there's times where you want to be really angry and go there and do something, but it is exposing the behavior. Because if people can't admit, like, first steps to problem solving, recognize that there's a problem. So eventually, after pressure, that's actually another step in it, is keeping pressure on it. You can't, as soon as I back away, well, that gives her ways to move in and think of all these other neat little things to do to me. And it's happening, like, all the time. Okay. And I'm kind of like sitting back here, like, well, this is that, this, like, and it's exposing the actual personality. It's narcissism. Like, I think you all get what I mean by that. It's not that I'm saying go hardcore, but it's like, you have to stay persistent. You have to stay on top of these people, because without
Kind of like I was
anybody
saying,
doing
the
that,
bad child that needs
yeah,
to be put in check. It
they're
needs to be
little children.
disciplined,
That's exactly it. They're little children who never growing up. That's exactly it. And now, it's weird to me, because I'm going to my parents, who also have narcissistic tendencies, and they are, and it's in them, and they'll never admit that. But it's like, when I talk to them, I almost I'm like, what? How am I the parent to you guys now? Like, I'm
Mm.
parenting you. Like, I'm telling you, how to do stuff. And when you say, when you put up your little temper tantrum, it's no. Like
No.
it's it's funny. It's just it's all, the loop comes around, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I growing up mentally, and it's a lot of the people that I associate with never. So now it's, a lot of people come back at me and they're like, oh, he's grumpy, this and that. They all have these excuses, but it's, in the end, uh, when it all boils down to it, is there is behavioral issues that people, they refuse to look at. So it's hard to be that way. I find it hard to be that way because I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to have to be riding everybody's ass and say, hey, this is wrong behavior, this is bad behavior, you got to change. Like, and they can only change themselves. I can't change them for them. So here's the information. And sometimes it's a little bit more where I have to speak up and be very verbal, because, like, how do you get through to somebody, and uh, if I told them in a nice little pleasing tone, it's never really going to work. Like, you have to be, there's a problem, and point the finger and say stop. Like, that's just parenting.
Yeah.
And my, so
And self-defense.
yes,
To me, it's
exactly.
part of the self-defense principle is also on emotional and mental issues, is
Hmm.
learning to stand up and quit letting yourself be someone else's rug,
Yeah, exactly. And then protecting children with these influences, like all these narcissistic tendencies, and people, they are influencing their own children, their children in community, or their friends. Like, it's like attracts like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So narcissists attract narcissists, and what I find is also there's narcissists that will thrive. You take mom and dad, if they're both narcissistic and they feed off each other the right way, well, they're going to be just fine. And I
Especially in our narcissistic culture that
yeah, exactly. It's
that
bubble think,
grows
right? One
just
bubble.
that behavior.
Hmm.
Why don't you close us off, Will? Give us
Cool.
your thoughts. And what do we do? What do we
Yeah.
do about this?
So some of the solutions that I want to talk about are, I mean, the parenting aspect. Everyone said phenomenal stuff. I think it's important to understand boundaries, and
Yeah.
this is something everyone needs to do. How do you know you're a narcissist? Until you look in the mirror and actually analyze, right, and actually start to do that self work. And this is something that I think everyone should do, and not just for narcissism. This for anything. This is about self improvement and your evolution and consciousness. You have to do the mirror work. You
Hmm.
have to observe your behavior, and objectively, you need to look in the mirror, and you need to come face to face with your insecurities, your failures, all that stuff that you buried down, that's coming out, in your unconscious behavior that you're projecting onto people. So I think it's boundaries. It's really important. And how do you know what your boundaries are? Well, you have to know yourself through and through. And this boundaries is a form of self-respect. And this is kind of the boundaries is also a preventative measure. If someone, if I'm single, if I'm dating and stuff, you got to have those boundaries where you start to see where the boundary has been crossed and it's a red flag, and then you withdraw, or you develop communication to see where this is going before you dive straight into something. And so I think that's really important. Boundaries and mirror work, self reflection, introspection, just for self improvement in general. And yeah, that's
I
it.
like
Look
what
in
you
the mirror. Just don't get hung up on the image, right?
yeah. I like what you said with boundaries, because that is a way of, like, if you're in a new relationship and if you set a boundary and say, hey, I don't want this, and you're finding that the boundary is not happening, then you just get out. Like, you don't want to be going too far there. I mean, be careful. That's very good that you pointed that out, because after all the stuff that I went through, one of the things that I want to make an example of this, because I went to set boundaries. I said, look, stop drinking for 30 days, and please take a break from your friend such and such, right? And 10 times I said that in a row, and she repeated this something back. It was totally different. And I'm like, no, that's not what I said. It's not that I said go cut out your friends at all. I said take a break. Just take a break. sit back, leave the drinking, all that kind of stuff. And no boundary set. And that's where I, tried to work things out. But once I kind of did that, and there was absolutely no boundary, I knew then. And that's when, then the narcissist going to double the efforts, because all these lies have now are exposed, and so now they're going to flood with more stuff. And I don't want to just target relationship stuff too. I mean, even when you're dealing with friends, or you're dealing with coworkers, you're dealing with, anybody really, like, this is all very important, because you're going to meet these people whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And I think what my big takeaway from what I both heard, Will and Brander say there, is becoming conscious of what's happening and recognizing the dynamics, and try to understand what your boundaries are, what they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the way things are being done doesn't mean it's the right way for them to be done. And a lot of us have grown up in situations where those boundaries weren't clear or well drawn or well defined. So
yeah, I think it's important too to clarify the boundaries too. I'm talking about internal boundaries, your own boundaries. You could do boundaries like Brander was talking about, but the boundaries that I'm talking about, your own personal boundaries, where they cross the line, cross into your discomfort or comfort zone, or that mainly, right? This is where boundaries come into play when there's a morality issue or a respect issue. So that's important to know your internal boundaries, where if crossed, you withdraw your energy. And this is where a narcissist gets their this is why I use the term succubus, right? They want to feed off that energy. Well, how do you combat that? You withdraw your energy, cut that food source off, so
don't give
they
them
don't
the
suck that
food,
life
right?
force. That's where the internal boundaries come into play. So you know when to, okay, I'm done, withdraw, not going to give you it anymore. So
works for the government too.
The government is the
Narcissist
biggest
government.
succubus.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The biggest sucker out there.
Great comment, Dom. That's what everyone needs to do. Recognize the government's a succubus and
cut them off.
Withdraw.
Cut them off, man. It's a leech.
Got it.
Good topic.
Well, I think
guys.
that's a good spot to end this week's talk. I think we gave folks a lot to think about and some actionable ideas how to deal with these situations. And I think it's going to be a good lead into the next True Media Roundtable, which I already have some ideas for. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. This is Chris Jansen. You can check me out endevil.life. And then on the One Great Work Network, which you can see the logo behind Brander there. And he's someone who does a lot of hard work helping that work out. And so does Will. So does Dom. So thanks all you guys. Anybody else want to shout out their website before we close up?
Oh, I didn't do my website at the beginning there. You can look, if everybody wants to go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca, and also goodalchemy.com are my two websites.
And that's GUD, right?
Yes, GUD Alchemy. Yeah. And Andy Brookshire is my partner at that website. So shout out to Andy.
Right on. Yeah. Andy's been a good participant on this show too. And Dom, veriteconsequence.com.
That's right.
naturalfreedomleague.com.
That's right. And I want to make a quick announcement real quick. This is a kind of a good segue into the topic. The Seed 4 Growth Conference is going to be a free online 2-day conference on spirituality, occultism. It's going to be great. I'm doing a presentation on conscious parenting for conscious beings. You can view it free on the onegreatworknetwork.com. This is May 14th and 15th. And you can go to cubbyhole.com, which is CUBBYWHOLE.com.
Right on. Yeah, looking forward to that event. That's going to be exciting. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining me tonight and sharing your ideas, thoughts, opinions, and truth, most importantly.
Thanks, guys.
So
appreciate it.
Have a great night. We'll do it again in 2 weeks.
Awesome.